This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 283 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. This episode is about Antarctic travel, so we're going to be shivering and thinking of penguins, basically. Before I start, I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today. So, down to Antarctica. I have never been, but I think like probably many travellers, I've often daydreamed about going there. Any time I've really looked into it at all, I've been completely put off by the cost. I think that's to be expected. And, the time involved too. It's not a quick trip. Although, of course I love to travel slow, but I was thinking about it and I can actually trace my real interest in Antarctica back to one of my favourite novels from the late 90s, which was a novel by an Australian journalist turned novelist, Nikki Gemmell, called Shiver. I'll leave a link in the show notes. It's a very autobiographical novel about her experiences of going to Antarctica on a scientific expedition as a journalist for Triple J Radio back in the 90s. So I actually reread it recently and I still recommend it. So that's some extra reading if you're curious about Antarctic life. Of course, these days, I can't help but think about Antarctic trips with a more thoughtful travel lens, and I'm kind of less certain about how I feel about Antarctic tourism. But on balance, I still want to go. We'll discuss a bit more about that during the episode. Actually, in the current season, I think I've had about a dozen friends, some writers, some tour leaders, some pure tourists heading down to Antarctica. So it's been really super present in my mind and in my Instagram feed. And one of these people is someone who's well known to listeners of the podcast, and that's my book club co-host, Justin Watson. And we caught up recently to talk about his trip to this mysterious southern continent. And the first thing I started off asking Justin was why he particularly wanted to go to Antarctica.
The main draw for me was probably the wildlife, but I guess I've seen penguins before in New Zealand and in Australia. So I've seen penguins and I've seen seals. So it's probably more than just the wildlife. It's probably also the unique location and scenery and it's that all-encompassing experience when you're there that is incredibly difficult to explain. And the best way I can kind of explain it is when you're on a bushwalk or you're in a jungle or somewhere like that, and it's just you there on a mountaintop or somewhere, and you're just watching some animals go about their day, and you can't hear anything. You can't hear any signs of humanity or anything like that. And I think that's probably the closest you can get to Antarctica. It's incredibly silent, even with the fact that you've got wildlife there. There's not a lot of background or ambient noise you don't pick up, whereas you just notice how much more quieter it is in life. Even on the ship, you just kind of sit there and the ship's docked and you sort of think you'd hear more. But
okay, so those are basically the same reasons I would imagine going, and I like the way you describe that kind of aloneness and stuff. When we were walking the Cape to Cape a few months back, we would get to the middle of the day and there's no people anywhere, and all you can see is this massive ocean, and it's that kind of, I imagine that but cold, icy, and massively more. Is kind of a bit like that.
Until word got out about my Zen spot, which was at the front of the ship on deck 7, as I called it. That if you got there early enough in the morning, it'd just be you, or maybe someone else, and you just, between the two of you, you knew you weren't going to ruin it for the other person by talking to them. You just ignored the other person and just stood there, looked out, and on sea days, it was just a ship rocking but lots of seabirds. But on Antarctic days, there was just silence amazing landscapes. And if you're lucky, you'd see something like a whale or don't know what what a group of penguins is called, but we saw a lot of them. A lot of them diving, dolphining through the water. So, you get lucky and you'd see something like that, and you're the only one there. And that was usually at like only 6:30 in the morning. You didn't have to get up too early for that little zen, serene moment.
So lots and lots of good reasons to want to go to Antarctica. I think I agree with all of those. I next asked Justin about some of the highlights of his trip.
The first time you land in Antarctica, and even though this was only the first landing for me was in the Shetland Islands, and so they're 100 or so k's from the peninsula, and that was the first time you sighted it. There's all these huge, like these hills these ice-capped islands are about 1,500 to 2,000 meters tall from sea level, and so they're by Australian standard. And you're at sea level. So by Australian standards, these things are massive, and they just got a lot of them have permanent ice on them. But yeah, and you see those, and then the first time you actually land, and then it's all become real. I think because of COVID, that was all anyone ever cared about was just getting their feet on the landing for the first time, and then it was like. You're a kid in a candy shop with your camera, or that's how I was, because on one side there was some Gentoo penguins doing
penguin stuff,
and then another side there penguin staff. I don't know what they do half the time. Then some chin straps, which are a different species of penguins on this island. So there was 2 on this island, and they'd already marked out a walking path, and you walked around, and you could see where all the penguin colonies were on your walk. Yeah, and it was just that realization that what you'd actually come to do has suddenly become real. And I think everyone was pretty smiley, happy that day. I don't think there was anyone going, "Oh, this wasn't worth it," or anything like that. So, and we had bad weather as well, and we missed a couple of landings and a couple of Zodiac cruises. So we had the ups and the downs on that trip being early in the season.
Yeah, it's a little bit riskier, isn't it?
Yeah. Another thing that happened, and this is a benefit of going early in the season, was we had a lot of snow, and it fell on the ship, and there were people on that ship who had never seen snow before, let alone, they're coming to Antarctic for the first time.
Amazing.
But this snow, they had so much snow on the ship, they ended up having to get all the workers out with snow shovels to get it off because it was unbalanced in the ship.
No way! Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so not to any kind of so it was just making it much more difficult for the ship to maneuver and everything like that. So but we had I don't know how much snow there was, but it was enough. People were building snowmen. They started off small and they got real big.
So cool.
So I think that was a highlight. Like seeing snow is one thing, but the snow falling is
it's so beautiful. And being an adult and experiencing it for the first time is really cool. Yeah. Like I was 25 before I experienced snow falling, and I will never forget it. So it was, it's just seems incredible. My poor dad, who's 85, has never seen snow fall. So we had enough. We didn't get much snow in Canberra, but I'd seen it close by,
fairly young in life, so to the point that I can't remember how old.
Yeah, well, that's right. You see, you don't have this amazing experience of having to wait until you're an adult.
People in the northern hemisphere as well. Would most of them will have seen snow at some stage in their life. So it's really only us sort of Australians and spread out around that don't have that sort of privilege.
Yes, it's not super common. That's true. Yeah. Do you have a wildlife highlight?
I think it probably was the penguins. I'm trying to think of times like, there was one moment where I was just watching 3 penguins and they were having an argument. I got a photo of that, and the 3 penguins are just going wah, 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 at each other. Nobody knows what they're really squawking about. When I'm not even sure what the genders of the penguins are, because penguins you can't tell the gender. They all look, males and females look alike. Okay. So they must know, because to make baby penguins.
Somehow that happens.
But to the human eye,
they're all the same.
Yeah, and so I don't know if it was three males fighting over something, or three females, or a mixture, don't know, a squawking. And one of the penguins got up and thought, right, I'm gonna solve this argument, I'm gonna muscle in. So it stood upright, waddled in a little bit, and then fell flat on its face.
Oh, fabulous.
And the other two just kept going squawk, 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 and then got back up again and got back into the three-way squawk. And
obviously penguins don't find watching someone else fall flat on their face as funny as we do. Otherwise it might have broken up the argument.
No.
But...
And you really, penguins on ice, you really don't need to wait for too long before you see that happen. Yeah. A penguin falling over. It sounds fabulous. Awful, but I think they're pretty useless. They're not designed to be on land.
No.
They're designed to go fishing.
Yes. So. And I'm sure they're not really injuring themselves. It's just how they don't get around so well on ice. So.
I mean, and you get things like the lazy, I don't know if they're lazy penguins or what, but they fall over and they go, I'm not getting up. I'll just push myself along with my feet along my belly. So the behaviours of the penguins, I think, was just, it was easily one of the best things.
Oh,
I'd go back just to watch penguins for hours.
Oh, I can believe that. I could watch them all day. They're just fascinating creatures. They seem to have so much expressiveness. And, of course, they're also a bit clumsy, which is fun. So, yeah.
And I think they're a little bit different on ice compared to, say, on rocks. I mean, and sandy beaches. Like the ones we have in Australia all go on the sand. I don't know if the antics are quite the same.
That's true.
They probably do a little bit.
Add in slipperiness and it's next level.
Yeah.
I doubt anyone would not want to watch penguins anywhere in the world, but especially sliding around in Antarctica. Now, the next topic that Justin and I discussed was the impact of tourism on Antarctica. So I have increasingly been worried about, should we even ever have anyone going to Antarctica? I worry, about the impact of visitors on an obviously fragile environment. I'm concerned too about how it's regulated. It's regulated by a governing body across many countries, and how easily these different countries involved can continue to cooperate. Can we kind of trust everybody? It's hard to monitor what people are really doing in remote places. That kind of thing worries me. However, tourism to Antarctica also does really seem to help fund and facilitate scientific research, and that's really important for lots of reasons, including conservation. So that's an important benefit. A bit back and forth, but I asked Justin his thoughts on the issue, and I asked him to start off by explaining the kind of trip that he was on.
So the trip I went on it's what they call one of the repositioning cruises. So the ship was coming down from the northern hemisphere, from its sort of season in the northern hemisphere, which would have been the winter up there. And there were literally people on this ship who spent 90 days coming from, I think, Norway all the way to Antarctica. Gosh. But so it came down through Panama and everything like that. And I boarded the ship in Valparaiso in Chile. And then we did an 18-day trip from there down to the Antarctic Peninsula, through the Chilean fjords, which was also probably a good highlight. I definitely recommend. You don't have to do those full. There's a lot of ships that will do that. Even there's a ferry in Chile that does the same place as the fjords, which is probably a cheaper way to do it. But yeah, definitely worth doing the fjords and stopping at some of these towns and stuff. So that was sort of part of the trip. That was one of the things that made me go, oh, this is a little bit more than just your standard peninsula trip, which most of the trips are either the trip from the tip of South America, from somewhere like Ushuaia, Punta Arenas, Puerto Williams. There's a few towns, but most, I think, are Ushuaia these days, to the Antarctic Peninsula, and back again in about 10 days. It's the majority. And then there's other trips that do the trip out to the Falklands, South Georgia, and the peninsula as well. And then you get some slight variations on the trips. Some of them, especially in the middle of summer, or southern hemisphere summer, you'll get the occasional one that will be a bit longer, and they'll try and get beyond the Antarctic Circle and push a bit further south. But when we went, there's absolutely no way you'd ever get a ship. And none of the ships that do these tourist things are actually what they call an icebreaker. They've just got a strengthened hull. So they can take impacts from smallish icebergs, but not biggish ones. And I think get through sea ice that's less, what they call annual sea ice. So it's only fresh sea ice from this year. If it's lasted throughout the previous summer, it's often too thick. So most of those ships can't do that. Yep. So they can just go through sort of fresh sea ice that's less than a metre thick kind of thing. So, and the ship I was on, there's generally two classes, under 200 people. So typically you'll get about 100 to 150. And then the bigger ship, which I was on, they can be up to 500 people. So we had about 350 on our ship. So it makes it a little bit cheaper, but it means you've got to get 350 people onto the ice, off again, and things like that. So it takes a bit longer. And there's less, like you get more comforts on those ships. You get, there's multiple restaurants, they're bigger. So they kind of sit between a real Antarctic expedition ship and a real cruise ship
style. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was like 3 restaurants on our ship, whereas I think most of those smaller ones have a single restaurant.
Yeah, makes sense.
But none of them have things like entertainment or anything like that. They all have,
there's no casinos.
Lectures, no casinos,
Thank goodness.
no nightclubs. There's definitely a bar on every ship.
Oh, that's fair.
That's the entertainment. Our bar had cocktail of the day every day, so that was always €6 cocktail of the day. So some people may have tested out every cocktail.
I think that would be important to do. From a research perspective.
So, but the food on my ship was all delicious. Like, I haven't eaten as well as I have on that ship. Like, it was just everything was cooked to perfection.
Oh wow, really?
Amazing.
Good quality. And did you use all 3 of the restaurant? Like, did you rotate around, or did you have a preference?
I went to 2 of them. The third one was more for people who spent a fortune and stayed in a suite.
Right. Okay.
But you could go in there, but you had to pay to get in there if you weren't in a suite. So I didn't go into that one, but I do know people who did, and they said it was nice. And the other thing with the ship sizes is the landing sites are also... So I guess going back to the thoughtful travel aspect now of it all, is that tourism in Antarctica is extremely regulated. It's probably... I'm not aware of anywhere else in the world that is as regulated as Antarctica is for tourism. So the benefits of that is that a lot of the impact that humans could make is all minimised by the regulations. So definitely environmental impact. Like, the rules are there's a limited number of people allowed on the ice at a time, so you don't have too many people. You can't take anything onto the ice at all. I don't even think you're allowed water. I'm trying to remember if we were allowed water. I never took any out because we were only out for an hour to 90 minutes. But yeah, it was like no toilets, nothing. Like, if you really, really need to go, they're probably going to tell you to jump back on the Zodiac and go back to the ship. Everything. So there's absolutely no waste on the, even covering in your footprints. If you make any footprints in the snow, cover them, fill them back in. And so their crew, they would go through, they'd set it all up, put flags and markers out where you could go, and then they would tidy it all up to make sure there was nothing there.
Wow. Really leave no trace.
Really leave no trace. And even the ships, like my ship being, it's fairly new, so it was built in 2019. Well, first cruise was 2019, and it was a hybrid ship, so it was using less, and they built these ships so that the current battery capacity and even the space for the battery is greatly underutilized. So what they've done
future-proofing
is going right, future-proofing the ship, because they know these ships are going to be around for 30, 40 years probably, and so they need to keep it. So, even just down to the fact that on the ship they gave us a water bottle each, and they had water filling stations. So they didn't want people to have... There's no bottled beverages other than even at the bar. Like, they would obviously... Anything that came in a bottle was then stowed somewhere to be recycled at a later date. The water was all recycled as well. I don't think it was for drinking water, but they used it for other things, and what was left was all clean and what they call was potable. Like they weren't quite up to. They said that probably wouldn't be reusable for drinking, but that would anything that they couldn't use could go back into the ocean. It was completely safe like that. So, but yeah, the whole thing is run by people who all these companies don't want Antarctica to be ruled.
Yeah, it's in their best interest.
So it's in their best interest. There's a lot of rules around the landing sites, how often they can be used, how many people can land at each site. So you're not having one landing site every day getting
they're rotated around.
They're rotating around. I guess the price also stops it from being mass tourism, but a lot of that is because of the regulations. You know, you've got to. It costs money to run these things to that level of making sure that there's no damage to anything done. I guess from the macro picture, there's always that. Yeah, but you've still got carbon emissions by going, and so that's something that isn't erased at the moment. But you know, I guess travellers have that problem all the time. Doesn't matter where you go, so that issue remains. But so if you didn't go to Antarctica and you went somewhere else, you'd probably still have the same carbon emissions. Yeah. But at least if you are going to Antarctica, you're not doing any extra damage that you shouldn't be doing. So I feel like, you know, as far as other than probably a well-run game park, you're not going to get that kind of experience or anywhere else in the world where it's being managed to such a high level that to ensure that environment stays the way it is.
So you didn't see any evidence of kind of tourism leaving any real impact?
No. Even some of the places with buildings, some of the landing sites with buildings, you weren't even, unless you were visiting those buildings, you know, you were told not to go touch them, not to go damage them. Some of them were research stations that were potentially going to be in use later in the summer. Some of them were just historical buildings so there was kind of this, even the man-made stuff that was there was also being respected and like, okay, it's already there. It's got historical significance, you know, like whaling stations and things like that. So they were keeping those intact as well. But yeah, so all of that, even, you know, the rules about how close you get to animals, all that kind of stuff you had to abide by. There was a briefing on all of that. And
did everyone on your ship behave well? Like, did they all... Like, I'm wondering, you know, sometimes in mass tourism you see people doing really idiotic things. Do you think there'd be situations where there's, you know, the idiot tourists who are, I don't know...
There probably could be, but I think the thing that the one thing that I think most people got tripped up on was they would make what would be walkways for us to walk along, and we would trample along, and we would leave pretty much a little indentation in the snow along that walkway. The funny thing is, penguins do the same thing, and penguins leave walkways, and they call them penguin highways. And the main difference between a penguin highway and a human one is the penguin one is shaded by the colour of their poo because they just poo all along the walkway.
They don't wait till they're back on the ship.
They don't wait till they're back on the ship. No. So, and the only thing I could see was every now and then the human walkway would have to cross one of these penguin highways. Right. And as a result, they'd always have someone stationed there to make sure if penguins were coming, you know, stand now 5 metres back, don't do it. But every now and then someone would be, the person monitoring it would be having a chat to someone, whatever. Every now and then someone would walk and they'd go, I wonder what's up this walkway. And they'd start walking along a penguin highway. And, yeah, someone would say, hey, you can't go up that way. That's for the penguins only. And they'd turn around.
Yes, sure.
I think that was maybe the worst thing. Yeah. But the thing is, what they don't want you to do is all your clothes get vacuumed before you go as well. So all your outerwear had to get vacuumed and cleaned. Your boots get washed every time you come off the ship. On the ship, your boots get washed. This is for Antarctica in the boot washing thing. So
there's no contamination or anything, or of course.
Yeah, that's the level that they take it to, kind of. A bit like, I guess, coming back to Australia and forgetting to declare your food
or your wooden items,
your hiking boots. Wooden items. So I think it's right up there in terms of that's how serious they take it. Probably to the next level though in many ways. So like so they don't want anything like, because everyone thinks, seed, what would a seed do? But if it's on the ice and some of the ice melts, or a penguin eats it or somewhere, and the penguin may deposit it somewhere then, and then it fertilizes, and
suddenly we have an invasive species on Antarctica. So
so all of that is very strict.
Yeah, good.
I never saw any evidence of anyone not doing that. Most of the stupidity, I think, on the ship was people
having too many cocktails,
complaining about having too many. I think there was people who'd come on the trip thinking it was going to be more like a cruise, when these trips are definitely not like a cruise.
Yeah.
The only thing in similarity they have is that they're on a ship.
Yeah.
But if you don't like learning stuff and going to lectures during the day, you might get bored. And if you don't like going to the science lab and learning stuff, or learning how to tie knots, or hanging out on a ship and talking to the ornithologists about the life of seabirds, or just mind your own company watching the world go by. If you don't like doing any of that, then
you really shouldn't be going, should you? So, okay.
You really shouldn't be going.
Right.
Yeah. So.
But some people obviously
And I think most people did go, realise they wanted, that's the experience they were getting. So it's really an educational experience, which is also another good thing. I think I'm pretty knowledgeable in the world of animals and stuff, but I learned a lot.
Oh,
so,
cool. Yeah. Because to me, that's one of the reasons that justifies going, I think, is like that the level of education and knowledge that you can gain, which then kind of feeds into conservation and all of that kind of stuff. So,
and I mean, it's not just lectures about wildlife. Like, we had lectures about geology, lectures about how ice sheets are formed and the sea ice and all of that, and the different types. They even did stuff on clouds. And, we even did one on the ship. Like, the chief engineer came and did a couple of chats.
Oh, cool.
And I went there. That was probably the least attended one I went to, but I absolutely loved it. That's where I learned all about how... Well, that's where you learned all about how the various systems on the ship, what they did, where your drinking water came from, all that kind of stuff. Where the toilet flushes went.
That's the stuff I want to know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Not only that, plus how the batteries work in the ship and... things like that.
Yeah,
like
cool.
they do some pretty cool stuff. It's not some people I heard were going, but with that batteries, they can only run the ship for like half an hour on batteries only. But that's not what the batteries are for. The batteries are there for it improves the efficiency of the ship, and when you need extra power, rather than ramping the engines up, the batteries can then provide that extra power.
Right.
And then when you don't need the extra power and things are quiet, then the batteries will get charged up again. It was kind of you're kind of keeping your engines running at roughly the same amount the whole time, and just using the batteries to flatten out the peaks and the troughs in your power consumption. And that apparently alone improves efficiency by 20%.
Right.
Is what we were told.
Yeah.
So haven't done the maths, and I'll just take your word for it.
I mean, yes, I am no engineer, so I can't be sure. But
I am, but still not going to do maths.
Fine. No, that's pretty cool. Because I find, it's kind of the argument of why should we travel anywhere? Because we can learn everything from the comfort of our computer these days. But experiencing it hands-on obviously is impactful, right?
I think people will notice this with, say, even children. Some children will learn really well from a book, and some children would learn much better when they're doing something and learning it hands-on, and others can read and learn it, or others need to be shown to learn stuff. And adults are no different, and I think it's always a different experience. I've learned lots of things just reading, but it's not as fun as learning it by doing or seeing. So whether that's a good justification, I'll leave that up for people to decide. But I think if you're going to travel, I don't think there's any reason why going to Antarctica is any worse than going anywhere else in the world. I don't think you're doing any more damage to the planet. That's one thing I've got out of that. And you're coming back. You're coming back with a greater appreciation of the planet. Like, I don't think anyone that's been to Antarctica and comes back and decides that all the greenies are wrong and they're going to start buying shares in fossil fuel companies. I don't think anyone's ever done that.
Exactly.
So, So I think, and a lot of the people who go are probably already in that mindset of doing what's right to save the planet, so there's probably not much need to change there. But there would be people who go being a bit sceptical and then are mesmerised by the beauty of the place and go, "Oh, we really should be saving this and doing more." So
yeah, and
that's what I hope people get out of going.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to ask other people, but that's what I always imagine. I think is the best reason to go. Apart from the fact that it's pure, it is incredibly enjoyable and so unique and special.
There's a level of self-indulgence by going there, and you can't.
All travel is a bit self-indulgent, though, isn't it?
And exactly.
And finally, I asked Justin for his tips for prospective Antarctic travellers, especially thoughtful prospective Antarctic travellers.
I think there's 3 or 4 things to determine. So, money, the cost of the ship is the main one. Most people look at. They go, "Oh, I want to go," and the cost is impacted by a few things. It's the number of people in your cabin. So, some ships do 3 and 4 berth cabins, which, if you know 3 or 4 people and you want to go and do it that might be a cheap way of going. But as you start going up and you want a nicer cabin, if you're that way inclined.
Or if you think you're going to feel really seasick, you probably don't want to be sharing it with 3 others.
Yeah, but I think you can get and that's right. So that may not be ideal, and you'll end up having that. The length of the trip, so how long you're going to go for. I think any trip you do, whether you do the 10-day one or you do some of the longer ones, you're still going to have a great time. You're still going to see amazing stuff. So it's a bit kind of like, sure, I mean, I've seen people who've been to South Georgia, which is an amazing, it just looks so amazing. And that's where you see the bigger penguins as well. The king penguins are there. Cool. But more expensive trips. They're 20-odd days. And you're looking at a 10-day, you're looking at double the price. A 10-day trip's this much, a 20-day, 23-day trip's going to be. So the type of trip, the length of the trip, the type of cabin you can afford, then you've got the time of the year. And the time of the year is where you can save a bit of money by going early or late in the season. But early in the season, you get the natural landscapes are more pristine. So the snow hasn't all melted. The penguin sites are pretty tidy. Like, you don't have the bad smells. You don't have it's just a much cleaner, more pristine environment. So even though there's no signs of humanity, the wildlife, however, does leave marks.
Yes.
So
the longer the summer lasts, yeah.
So and early in the season is when, so the penguins start mating about that time. So you're not going to see penguin chicks, but the seal pups are due early in the season as well. So
okay, cool.
And then the whales come down sort of. So you need to have a look at the wildlife charts to see what's going to happen when, because there's all different things going on. So the penguin chicks all sort of hatch later in the season. So, and then and the weather as well. The weather affects it. So if you're going in the middle of the season, December, January, you're going to have the best chance of nicer weather, but it's generally you're between the chicks being born and the seal pups. So even though you're getting the best weather, you're compromising on all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's quite a decision, isn't it? I didn't quite realise. I never thought of the the animals.
And all of these. So the time of the year you go affects the weather and the price, the size of the ship as well as the type of cabin. So and the other thing is, the further out if you can book, these trips tend to book out. Well, they'll take bookings well over a year in advance. Yeah. So, and you can often get. I'd say often get 20 to 30% off if you book early. Wow. So
yeah, that's significant, especially for a pricey trip. That's a big chunk. So
yeah. Or or as I found out, do it like a group tour with photographers, which is what I did, and the price for the group was actually not too bad in general there either. So I think it was. I don't know if it was a little bit cheaper, but but it seemed to be a little bit better because it was a group booking. So,
right. Yeah, nice.
So that may be a factor. You'd need to look into that. Yeah. But they're the main concerns. The ship size, a lot of people will go, "Oh, you definitely want the smaller ship." And I would say the smaller ships are probably ideal, but they're going to cost more money. Yeah. So, but the small ships are also going to rock more when you cross.
I was thinking this, yes.
so there's negatives there as well.
Yeah.
And if the weather's bad, the size of the ship doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to land if the weather's bad. So if you go early or late in the season when the weather could turn, it can still happen in the mid-season. Then you're still going to have those issues, and you just got to be. I guess you're just going to be open-minded.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just one of those trips where you need to be flexible about what's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, most of them you're going to have 4 days on that peninsula area, and the bigger ships will definitely aim to do a landing and a Zodiac cruise every day. The smaller ships, if they can squeeze them in, they might squeeze an extra, might do 2 landings instead of it just depends. They can maybe squeeze a bit more in, but they're all pros and cons, and if money was no object, then everyone would probably just do the best trips, the 23-day trip to South Georgia in the
luxury
captain's
small
suite.
expedition. Yeah.
The one thing I will say to anyone is you definitely don't look at the price and go, oh, that's too much money. If you can save the money up, it's going to be the best money you ever spend on travel, if you ask me. Like it's so far. I just haven't done anything like this before.
You've done a lot of travel, so that's a really big call to hear you say that.
And I've done a lot of travel.
Wow.
Like, there's cool places in the world. I could say Cuba's awesome. I can say Iceland's awesome and stuff like that, but it doesn't compare. It's just,
totally blows it away, blows everything away, really. It's like that.
It's just a different experience.
So to sum up, it was obviously a truly amazing trip. Thank you, Justin, for all your Antarctic thoughts and some useful tips too. Funnily enough, actually, on the day of editing this, I've been hanging out with Justin in Perth. He's visiting from Canberra for a few days, and we were at Bullabardip, the WA State Museum, this morning, and we happened to come across a taxidermied penguin that had been collected by Sir Douglas Mawson's chief physician on an Antarctic expedition some 110 years ago. So that seemed very apt. Anyway, I guess my final brief thoughts on Antarctic tourism can be summed up reasonably succinctly. The first thing is, which we didn't mention earlier, but I think is important to mention, I think flying over Antarctica is not okay. I don't understand the benefits of anything from the flyover trips. I mean, yes, we might raise some awareness of the beauty of Antarctica, but I doubt that outweighs the emissions and the lack of kind of practical and hands-on experience. If you want to see what Antarctica looks like from above, watch some, beautifully shot documentaries instead. You'll get a better view than trying to crane out the window and swap seats with people halfway through, I think. That's my personal opinion. But in terms of heading down there on an expedition cruise, at the moment I think I would still go on one day, but I would choose my trip extremely carefully. Let me know what you think. Come along to the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers or the LinkedIn group for Thoughtful Travellers. Just search for Thoughtful Travellers in either of those platforms or check the link in the show notes. The show notes for this episode will be at notaballerina.com/283. And there I will also leave a link to Justin's blog. He has some excellent photos, especially penguins, on his blog posts about his Antarctic trip. You can find that at justins.world. It's the whole address. So, but all of that will be in the show notes as well. So as always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.